So it's time for our next talk by Paul Gessler. I first met Paul in 2015, I think. You were not working for Overleaf at the time.
Yep.
Do you want to say some words about yourself? I mean, you're probably there.
Sure. As Arthur mentioned, my name is Paul Gessler. I'm a member of the support team at Overleaf. So we have many users of Overleaf. They write in with questions about how to use LaTeX, how to accomplish a certain task in LaTeX, and of course, if they run into any problems with Overleaf. We hope those are few and far between, but our support team, it's me and a few other people. We help out our users, and as we all know, our lives have changed in 2020. We are not having this conference in person, we're having it remotely. And because lots of LaTeX users are in academia, teaching, professors, we have a lot of users who potentially would use LaTeX for their teaching, but now they have to do this remotely. And lots of teachers and professors have had to adjust very quickly for some universities in the course of a few days when decisions were being made to move coursework online. And at Overleaf, we had talked for a while about starting a series of webinars. And I'll start sharing my screen. So back in March, when everything with coronavirus really started to pick up all across the world, we finally decided, okay, this is a good opportunity to start our webinars. And so you can see these at overleaf.com/events/webinars. We have a number, well, we have one right now scheduled coming up, and then we have some past webinars that you can watch on demand. My talk today is based on a webinar that I previously ran, but I've modified it a little bit to cover some topics that might be more of interest to TUG members. So I'm starting out here just to level set for the talk. Sarah had a great talk earlier about how do we teach LaTeX itself. And that's not really what my talk is about. My talk is about how you can use Overleaf itself to work with students, to do assignments or teach assignments, accept assignments from students in a remote environment while still using LaTeX. So you would not want to throw a student into this and tell them they had to use Overleaf to submit their homework if they were not familiar with LaTeX. We're assuming that the students all have some knowledge of LaTeX, which is common in mathematics, some engineering curriculums. It's taught as a base course. So just to start out with that assumption. But what I wanted to cover today is how can a professor or a teacher use Overleaf to effectively work with assignment templates, share those assignment templates with students, potentially accept completed assignments from students and provide feedback on them, and finally, how to organize all these projects, because if you have many students, potentially you have many projects coming back to you. So I've started out here on my Overleaf project dashboard, and you can see that I've created some tags to organize all of my homework templates. So if I'm teaching multiple courses, or if I have multiple sections of a course, I can have a template for each assignment. And I'll talk more about the organization of these a little bit later. But for now, let's open up one of the templates. And I know we have lots of mathematicians in the audience. This is nothing groundbreaking. It's just a basic math assignment to have as an example to go through some of these workflows. So you can prepare your assignment template directly in Overleaf, or if you already have projects that you've created using an offline LaTeX system on your computer, you can certainly upload those to Overleaf if you would like to work in the Overleaf editor. So anything that's in Tech Live basically is available on Overleaf. So you can prepare your assignment template. One thing that is kind of useful if you have macros or if you wanted to set up a special style for a problem box or anything like that, you don't necessarily want the students to be worried about, okay, what is all this LaTeX code? So one thing that you can do with Overleaf is you can, of course, create your own custom package just like you can with any text system. But with Overleaf, I can share that between projects. And that allows me to make this basic package effectively read-only within the project that the students will be working in. So you can see here, I've just defined, just for the example, a simple problem environment that keeps track of some counters and does some styling. So I can hide this away from the users, the students, so that they don't have to worry about what's going on with this extra code. So then if I go back to my main tech file for this template, of course, you can use tech comments to put any instructions that you want the students to mind. Lots of professors are using learning management systems. So you might have the official instructions for submitting an assignment or the official deadlines in the learning management system. You can always refer your students to that system from a comment in the Overleaf project. You can put any instructions for the students in comments, just like you normally would. And then you can define your problem sets or whatever is going to be in the assignment. So when you're all done putting the assignment together, now we need a way to distribute this to students. And one thing that I will point out before I go into the sharing of this project, it can be handy to keep track of which version of an assignment you're distributing to students. So for example, if you're teaching multiple sections of the same course, or you're teaching the same course in different terms, you can use the Overleaf history feature to keep track of changes to the assignment. And it's a good practice to label a version when you share it with students, so that if there's ever a question, if you change the problem set from year to year or section to section, you can keep track of when the project was shared and what the state was when it was shared. So when you create a label in Overleaf history, you can see that on the right-hand side, we have a label that I can always come back to and see what the state of the project at that point was. So if I change this assignment in the future, I can always come back to this version if I need to. Okay, so now we have our assignment. It's ready to be distributed to students. So the best way to do that, if your students are working in Overleaf, or if you'd like them to work in Overleaf, is to use our share menu. And there's two ways to share an Overleaf project. Boris mentioned this in his talk yesterday. The first method is link sharing, which is available to anyone, even on the free plan. And with link sharing, I'll turn this on temporarily. I won't leave it on because I don't necessarily want people to have access to this document. But with link sharing, you get two special links to the project. One link is an editing link. You want to be very careful with how this link is distributed, because anyone who knows this link will be able to edit your project. And then there's a separate link for read-only access or view-only access. So if you want to share with students via link sharing, we recommend using the read-only link so that the students will be able to view the project and copy it so that they can do their own assignment, but not be able to edit your actual assignment. So I'll turn that off for now. I don't want any nefarious characters editing my document. Or if you don't want to use link sharing, you can share via email address. On the free plan, you can only invite one person to each project by email address, which isn't going to work for a typical class full of students. But we partner with many universities, so lots of universities will provide unlimited collaborators for Overleaf for their faculty and staff. So that's an option. Otherwise, like I said, link sharing works even on the free plan. So I'm going to share this with one of my other Overleaf accounts as a read-only access level. And so now I can see whether that invite has been accepted. So with link sharing, you can't see if the recipient has opened the document, but if you invite students by email address, you can see if they've viewed it or not. So if I go over to my other Overleaf window, you won't see this here, but I'll accept that invite. And so you can see now there's another person working in this document. Of course, I don't have editing privileges. So as a student, I would have to go and create a copy of this project, and that would give me my own copy to work on. Okay, so if you do this for any number of assignments, you're going to wind up with a lot of projects in your projects list. So this is just a simple workshop account that I have. So I don't have a ton of projects in here right now, but you can imagine if you're doing 1 to 3 assignments a week for multiple courses, this can add up quite quickly. So if you just filter on all projects, you'll see all the projects that you've joined in Overleaf, but this list can get quite overwhelming fast, especially once students start sharing their projects back with you. So there's a couple different ways to filter things. You can select your own projects versus projects that have been shared with you. So this would be a way to separate your templates and your own code from things that have been shared with you by others. But that's not very granular. It's just what's yours and what's everybody else's. So we recommend organizing assignments by tags or folders. We kind of brought, when Overleaf and Share LaTeX merged a few years ago, we brought together the comments of tags and folders. So we left both words in there just not to confuse people, but these really do work more like tags because each project can have more than one tag applied. So here you can see I have one tag that has my project with my shared common package file. And then I have another folder that's all of my assignment templates. And then you'll probably want to create a folder for each homework assignment so that when students share projects back with you, you can organize those in a clean way. So my student today is myself, but in the background here, I have completed the assignment, and now I'm going to share it with the professor. So if I refresh my project list, now I can see that one of my students has shared a project with me, and I can click to join that project. I'm not going to open it yet because I want to show organizational things first. So you'll see that I'm still on this homework templates tag, so I haven't seen that project. But if I go to the shared with you list, you can see the project here, or if I go back to all projects. If you're dealing with a lot of projects coming in and being shared with you, this is something that I use quite a bit, is the uncategorized filter. So I can see any projects that have come in that I have not tagged yet. So the way I would recommend to do this is if you have students share the project with you, then you can go to this uncategorized view, come in, and you can bulk select if there's a lot of them in here. And what I would recommend is to create like an ungraded tag so that you can keep track of what's been graded and what is still left to grade. And then this is from homework assignment 1 in MA 101. So we're going to put it in that folder as well, or tag. So now if I go to ungraded, I can see that I have 1 assignment left to grade. Or if I go to assignment 1, I can see all of the assignments that have come back to me for this particular homework. So this is a good way to stay organized if you have lots of students sharing projects with you. So I will go and open this project now. And you can see that the student's copy of the project still has that link to my custom package. So the student won't have to worry about that at all. And if I go back into the assignment itself, I can go, if I want to review these directly in Overleaf, I can check their work. Did they get the right answer? Yes, this looks correct. So again, this is obviously a fairly basic math problem, but we're just using this to illustrate the Overleaf workflow. So every professor or teacher is going to set this up a little bit differently. Some professors would still prefer to print these out and grade on a hard copy. Other professors will be more comfortable with providing feedback in the Overleaf environment. And this is really nice because if the student shares the project with you, the student can see your feedback real time if they're still viewing the project. So I can come in and add comments. And the student, if there's anything that needs clarification or discussion, these comments are threaded so the student can reply. If we have a discussion back and forth and we finish things up, we can always resolve the comment, and then it will appear in this resolved comment threads section up at the top. So I noticed that the student has got the right answer, but they didn't exactly show that much work. So we can put some additional comments in here. And again, with a more involved assignment, you might have more involved comments that you're keeping track of here. So this commenting feature is really useful if you want to have a discussion with your students that's recorded in the Overleaf project. They'll always have access to these comment threads to see what is going on with the feedback on their work. So now that I've provided some comments, I can go back up to my project list, and I'm going to remove the ungraded tag from this project because I've finished providing some feedback. I've recorded the grade in my other system, and I'm all done working with this project. So you can see how if you have many students sharing projects, you can always come back to this ungraded tag to see what work you have left to finish up. And if I go back into this assignment, a couple of other things to point out. When the student shares the project with you, you will receive an email with an invitation to the project at the time stamp that the student had invited you. So you can check that they've met the deadline based on that timestamp, but you also might want to look if they've made any changes since the deadline has happened. If it took you a while to look at the project, you can also see what has been happening in the project potentially since the deadline. One thing to point out with Overleaf, if you're using an Overleaf free account, we provide the last 24 hours of detailed history. But if you're on the free account, history past 24 hours is not stored. But what is stored is the labeled versions. So if you ask the student to label a version when they submit it, that state gets tracked past that 24-hour limit for the free plan. So that's one way to approach checking deadlines. In addition to the comments, we also have a live chat that you can use between collaborators in the project. So this is not attached to any of the source code, but if you were in the project at the same time as the student and you had a question about something, you can always send a message here. At any point, you can see who is working in the project at that time with the list of collaborator icons up at the top. So you can see that my other account is actively working in this project. You can also see the cursor location of the other user. And then just a few things to point out here. Common things that sometimes come up are students, if they're new to the Overleaf platform and they're working on a homework assignment, a lot of times they see this submit button and think that that can be used to submit to the professor. So this is a great feature of Overleaf, but it's not really applicable in this case. Typically, the submit feature is used to submit to different journals that we partner with, or the archive, or if you have a template that you wanted published more broadly, like a thesis template, you can do that to the Overleaf gallery. But this would not be used for typical student homework. So if you did want to use this approach, just make sure to provide clear instructions to the students as to how they can submit that project to you. I'm guilty of this too. I don't always read, but additional reminders of what the correct procedure is are always appreciated. One other thing that I did want to highlight is, in addition to the comments feature, the comments feature is available on the free plan. If you have a paid plan to Overleaf or your university partners with us, we do also offer track changes. So you may have seen this before, but with track changes, if I wanted to make corrections to a student's work, we could turn on track changes after the assignment has been submitted. And then anything that is typed since we turned on track changes will be tracked as an individual change that can be rejected or accepted later on. So this is handy if you're making more substantial comments, or if you wanted to use LaTeX markup in some of your comments, you could actually write within the document so that it would get compiled, but then still track what was added after the assignment was submitted. So that's another good tool. And then if you have a larger document with multiple files, you can always go to the overview section to see everything that's going on with comments and track changes within the project. So just to recap, I'll go back to my all projects list here. You can see that Overleaf could be useful if you're requiring students or asking students to work in LaTeX for their homework. It's a great collaborative platform. The use case that I've outlined here today was primarily for individual assignments, but if your students are working on any group projects, this is also a great way for them to work on reports and documents in a distributed fashion versus if they're used to meeting up in a lab session. We can't really do that nowadays. So like I said, Overleaf is a great tool to enable these types of workflows in a LaTeX syntax that's common to many fields. So today I've covered how to create your assignment templates, some best practices for organizing those assignment templates, how to share the assignment template with students and accept that work back from them when they submit it, and then different ways that you can use Overleaf to provide feedback and collaborate with students as you're reviewing their assignments. So I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, so I will open it up at this time. I think I've seen some coming in, so I will take a look at what we have for questions. Okay, we had a few questions come in. Please, if you have any more, type them in the Q&A box. Francisco asked, history label is for the project or the file? Okay, so I showed that at the beginning with labeling the versions. And this is for the state of the entire project at the history point where you labeled it. Whoops, I went to the wrong project here. Let me go back to the template. So this label that I created is tracking the state of all the files in the project at that point in time. So in this case, it says edited main.tech because that was the change that was made, but the label actually keeps track of all the files in the project at that point in time. So if this package file had changed, it would also get tracked with that label. And I also forgot to mention that at any history entry in the list, you can always download a zip archive of that version of the project. Okay, Aman asked, is there a way to diff files from different projects in the Overleaf UI? That's a good question. And currently we don't have a convenient way to compare two projects. If you have changes within one project, you can compare versions. So here you can see what I changed earlier today, just some minor edits. But we don't have a convenient way to compare two projects if they're separate Overleaf projects. The best way to do that would be to download a zip archive of each and compare them offline, which I understand is not very convenient, but that would allow you to compare the two projects if you needed to. Okay, Gary asked, is there a way to share tech files or images across multiple projects? This would be useful if multiple projects load the same files. Yeah, this is a great question. So I use this in order to get that package file into my project, but I didn't show how to do it. So we have time, so I'll show how to do that. So if I create a blank project, so when I create a blank project on Overleaf, it just gives me a skeleton document to start working with. And so this is the procedure to share files between projects. So if I go to new file, the default is just to create a blank file in the editor so that I can continue editing it. But we do also offer a lot of other methods for adding files. And if you wanted to share files between projects, again, this is what I did for that custom package file. I can say add file from another project. And then this dropdown has all of my projects that I have access to on my Overleaf account. So in this case, I put that custom package file in my common files project. So I select that project, and then I can grab that sty file. So I'm showing the example for a package file, but this would work for any file type that's supported on Overleaf. If you had a project whose output you wanted to share between projects, you can also choose this select from output files area. So the default gives you a list of all the input files for the project that you've selected. But if you wanted to look at, say, the output files of another project, you can grab any outputs from other projects as well. So I'll grab that package file. If I wanted the file to have a different name in the child project, as it were, I can do that here. In this case, I'll just keep the name the same. And now that gets created. And there's a couple of important things about how this works. So if I go back to this common files project and I change the package file, it won't automatically update any project that links to that file. And we do this because we don't want users to be able to like inadvertently break a project. So that if they forget that something is linked and they come back months later and it doesn't compile, we don't ever push a change to a project that has linked to a file. So if I change this file, let's say I add, like Jim said, use math tools instead of AMS math. If I want to make that change. So it won't automatically make that update. I have to go to each project that links to it and say refresh, and now you can see that that came in. So that's an important thing to watch out for when linking projects. Okay, Aman asked
one
a
follow-up question.
Yes.
Sorry, one follow-up question on this. You showed this option of importing output files, and that led me to a question: what is an output file in that sense? Does this only allow importing the PDF file, or also other files another document might have generated?
That's a good question. At the moment, it would only be PDF files, but that is something that we have had requests for. It doesn't come up very often, but occasionally people want to share like a BBL file or something like that. So right now it's only the output PDF files from other projects, but it is something that we are looking at expanding for the future.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so going back to Aman's question about automatic commits to a synced GitHub repository. Okay, so when we talk about using Overleaf with Git or GitHub, there's two different aspects to this. So the first method is using a raw Git clone link. So this essentially allows Overleaf to act as a Git remote for a local Git repository. So if you choose Git on the Overleaf project menu, you get a URL to use as a remote. The other method, which Aman is referring to here, is we do offer a direct sync with GitHub. And this works a little bit differently. Instead of working with raw Git commands like you would here, when you set up a GitHub link, I don't have my account linked here, but if you set up a GitHub repository for an Overleaf project, that sets up a two-way sync between Overleaf and GitHub. And with this method, there are no automatic commits. So you decide, you have to come into the Overleaf project, choose the GitHub menu option, and when your account is linked, you'll see some options to either pull changes in from GitHub or push changes to GitHub. And if you're pushing changes to GitHub, you have the opportunity to enter your own commit message in that area. And again, none of that happens automatically. You have to come to the GitHub sync and choose when to push and pull changes. Okay, one more question here. I have a main file and other standalone files which produce images in PDF format. I include it in the main. Is it possible without downloading the output of the standalone files and uploading them in the projects? Yeah, so I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think this is another case where the sharing files between projects would be helpful. So if I understood the question correctly, this person wants to create like a standalone graphic. So I'll just do something quickly here. You're not going to get any fancy drawings from me right now, but and we can get rid of some of this stuff. So if I create a project that has some standalone graphics in it, so this is a cropped graphic image, and if I wanted to include that in another project, I can come in, and this is where using that output files comes into play. So if I look for my graphics project, so I don't want to grab the input file. In this case, I want an output file, and I'm going to select the PDF, and I can change the name. And then so now I can have access to that external graphic project that just is a graphic output. I can share that amongst multiple other projects. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, it looks like we also have questions in the chat. Let me see if I can get over to there. If there are any other questions, please keep them going. I'm just going to scroll through the chat and see if there were any other questions in there. Okay, one question was about allowing Lily Pond to be executed. Oh, I see Tom already answered that. Sorry, I got to read a little bit further down. Okay, Boris asked, can we add a submit to your professor custom button? This is a really good question. We can't do that at the moment, but it is something that we are investigating because this is a very common use case where professors want more convenient ways to collect assignments from many students. So we don't have this at the moment, but it is something that we are investigating. Okay, a question about other Git web hosts. That's another question that we get asked quite frequently. So we do offer the direct sync with GitHub, but we don't currently support other Git hosts this way. We don't support GitLab, and we don't support Bitbucket. We don't support any privately hosted enterprise options like GitHub Enterprise or GitLab Enterprise. So right now, the publicly available github.com is the only Git host that we have a direct sync integration with. If you did need to work with other types of remotes, what we recommend, the interface is not as clean as the direct Git integration, but you can clone your project, set up multiple remotes on that clone, and then use your local repository to push and pull changes between the various remotes. Okay, one more question that we had. Am I okay on time still? I think so. One other question that we had was about getting the comments synced with Git in some ways. This is another common thing that people ask about. At the moment, if you put comments in the file, like I was demonstrating with the review pane here, these are currently only visible on Overleaf itself. They would not be visible if you sync with Git or GitHub, or even if you download the source files of the project. And that's because the comment system is tracked specifically in Overleaf. We don't have a way to transfer those comments to other systems at the moment. So apologies for the limitation there. One thing that is worth mentioning is if you have a, if you create a labeled version, like this, and then if you do a git clone of the project or a git pull if you have the remote already set up, the label does get used as the commit message. So that is one way to get access to some information about what's going on in Overleaf in your Git repository.
But label is not a tag, it's a commit message, right?
That's correct. It doesn't appear in the files themselves. It only appears in the Git history.
No, I mean that in Git you have commit messages and you have tags, and label is mapped into commit rather than to tag.
Yes, that's correct.
But the other direction doesn't work because when I push my Git with messages, I don't see them in labels, or is it just I did not look?
Yeah, sorry if my last statement was confusing. Right now, it only goes in one direction. So a label that you create in Overleaf history does get used as a commit message in Git, but the commit messages that you create in Git do not automatically translate to tags in Overleaf. Sorry if I was unclear. All right, if there are no other questions, I will turn it back over to the hosts. Thanks everyone for listening.
And there is still one question from Aman, whether the open source version is feature complete. Then I will just answer, if you mean the community edition that you can install yourself, then it's basically quite equivalent to the free version of the cloud Overleaf. And we also have the paid version that you can install yourself, self-hosted, which is called a Server Pro. And there are all the other features.
Yes, thanks, Tom. I've missed that question come in. So like Tom said, we do have an open source version that you can install on your own server. And like Tom said, that works comparable to the free plan of Overleaf. And then we also offer Server Pro, which is a paid self-hosted system that works quite similar to the paid version of Overleaf Online. All right, I will turn it back over to Arthur then. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Paul. Obviously, Overleaf is a topic that really engages the community.